This black man is accused of abusing a white girl, but the truth will shock you. DeAndre Lawson is accused of assaulting a popular girl in a town riddled with corruption and racial injustice. The defense attorney Camille Foster uncovers dark secrets, risking her life to expose the truth. With the system against them, will they survive long enough to find justice? Foster uncovers deep corruption within the police force, making her a target. As threats mount, she risks everything to expose the truth. With the system closing in, Camille faces an unexpected enemy who could destroy everything. Will she survive long enough to take them down? The Lawson family had hoped for a fresh start. They were determined to leave behind their old lives and settle in Maplewood, a small town nestled in the quiet southern hills. For Terrence, the move was a chance to escape the chaos of the city and find some peace. For Felicia, it was an opportunity to breathe again after a long period of stress. Their 17-year-old son, Maplewood, seemed like a place where he could focus on school, sports, and his future without constant distractions. The town itself seemed to fit that picture perfectly. Maplewood was small, too small for most people to notice, but big enough to offer the kind of community that could keep their families safe, trees, houses with neat lawns, and children playing in the yards. The air was fresh, the pace slow. To any outsider, it looked like the perfect place to settle down. But DeAndre felt something off as soon as they pulled into their new home, a modest house on a quiet street near the town. Setting up his basketball in the driveway, he noticed the way people looked at him as they walked past. It wasn't overt, but there was something in their eyes. A kind of coldness. A discomfort. "Hey, you okay?" his mother asked, watching him pause by the basketball hoop. "Yeah, I'm fine," DeAndre replied, shrugging it off. After all, maybe he was just imagining. Small towns weren't used to strangers. He would get used to it. His first week in Maplewood passed quietly. He went to school, met a few classmates, and practiced basketball at the local gym. Everything seemed fine until the day he met Sophia Lancaster. Sophia was everything DeAndre was not. A popular girl from a wealthy, everyone in town admired, beautiful, confident, and always surrounded by a group of friends. The Lancasters owned half of the town's businesses, and Sophia was expected to follow in her family's footsteps. But when DeAndre met her in the school hallway, she didn't act like the others. She smiled at him, genuinely, and asked if he played basketball. He was paid him much attention before. "I heard you're good," Sophia said, leaning against the lockers. "Maybe we could team up for the basketball tournament next month." DeAndre blinked. "I'm just a player on the team," he said, feeling a little awkward. "I'm not the star." Sophia laughed. "You don't need to be. You've got talent. I can see it." Her words, light as they were, had been the quiet kid who stayed under the radar. People were nice, but they rarely took him seriously. To hear someone like Sophia, who seemed to have it all, take an interest in him, it felt like a rare moment of validation. The next weekend, the town held its annual fair. Food stalls, rides, and games lined the main street. DeAndre wasn't really into fairs, but his mother insisted and maybe check out the basketball game. That's when he saw her again. Sophia was standing with a group of her friends, laughing, when she spotted him walking by. Without missing a beat, she waved him over. "Hey, DeAndre, right?" she called out. "Come join us. You've got to try the funnel cake." DeAndre felt a little out of place, especially not from someone like Sophia. But as he walked over, he couldn't help but notice the way her friends looked at him, some with curiosity, others with clear disdain. He shrugged it off. He wasn't here to make enemies, but he didn't care about their opinions either. They chatted for a while, laughing about school and enjoying the conversation more than he expected. He even caught Sophia's boyfriend, Logan Bennett, shooting him a hard stare from across the fairgrounds. Logan, a big, athletic guy, was clearly not happy about Sophia's attention. "Hey, you should join us for the game tonight," Sophia said, still smiling. "It'll be fun." DeAndre wasn't sure what to say. He didn't want to be the guy who showed up uninvited, but another part of him couldn't ignore the way Sophia seemed to enjoy his company. As the sun set, DeAndre finally decided to go. He'd play it cool, Just enjoy the night. When he arrived at the game, he found Sophia and Logan already sitting in the front row, their friends gathered around them. Logan was visibly annoyed,
But things
but
quickly took a
Sophia
dark
didn't
turn.
seem to mind. The next day, Sophia didn't show up for school. No one seemed to know where she was. By noon, rumors started spreading like wildfire. Some claimed she had run away, others said she was sick. But by the time the school bell rang for the end of the day, the truth was even worse. Sophia had been found unconscious in the woods outside town. She was bruised and
People were in
battered,
shock.
barely recognizable. Whispers filled the streets, and the town seemed to explode in confusion and fear. The very next morning, a squad car pulled up in front of the Lawson family's house. DeAndre's father, Terrence, was at work, and his mother was inside cleaning, unaware of what was happening. But DeAndre, standing by the window, watched as Sheriff Warren Briggs approached their door, gun drawn. DeAndre Lawson,
for the
the
assault of
sheriff Sophia
shouted.
Lancaster. DeAndre's mind went blank. He didn't even know what to say. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. His heart raced as the sheriff moved closer, his gun still aimed at him. DeAndre stared at the sheriff in disbelief. The gun was cold against his chest, the officer's grip unyielding as he barked orders. Get on the ground. Now, everything was moving in slow motion. He barely even processed what was happening, the words hanging in the air like a puzzle piece that didn't fit. He'd been accused of assaulting Sophia Lancaster. How could that even make sense? His hands shook as he slowly lowered himself to the ground, the gravel scraping against his knees. Sheriff Briggs kept the gun aimed at him, his face expressionless. The sound of approaching sirens grew louder. DeAndre's mind raced as he tried to make sense of it all. One moment, he'd been chatting with Sophia at the fair, enjoying the novelty of attention from someone like her. The next, he was on his knees, arrested, accused of something he couldn't even begin to understand. Stay down, stay still, the sheriff ordered, his voice sharp, mother's frantic voice from inside the house. She had heard the commotion. She must have known something was wrong, but what could she do? Terrence wasn't home, and DeAndre was alone with the officers now. He felt small, trapped as the sheriff called for backup. Within moments, along with two other deputies, moved with quick precision, one of them cuffing DeAndre while the others inspected the yard. His hands were bound tightly, the cuffs biting into his wrists. Get in the car, Sheriff Briggs commanded, his eyes narrow as he glanced at DeAndre. You're coming with us. DeAndre opened his mouth, desperate to explain, but the words caught in his throat to explain the mess that had spiraled out of control so fast. In a haze, he was shoved into the back of a squad car. As the car pulled away, DeAndre could see his mother standing in the doorway, her hands pressed to her mouth in shock. Her eyes were wide, unable to understand the sudden turn of events. She called his name, but the car's engine roared to life, drowning Maplewood was a different town. The street corners buzzed with whispers. People gathered in small groups, talking in hushed voices, glancing nervously at the Lawson house. The air was thick with suspicion. No one could believe what had happened. DeAndre Lawson, a quiet new kid, arrested for attacking a popular girl from the town's wealthiest family. It didn't sit right with most others, more reserved, but all were watching, waiting for the truth to come out. But truth, it seemed, was not what anyone was after. By mid-afternoon, Sheriff Briggs held a press conference. Cameras flashed as he stood before a crowd of reporters. His voice had been arrested after being identified by a witness who claimed to have seen him with Sophia in the woods just before the assault. As the sheriff spoke, DeAndre's name was already being dragged through the mud. He was accused of not only assaulting Sophia, but also stealing her necklace, which, according to the sheriff, had been found in DeAndre's backpack, someone who had been at the fair the previous night. His account was shaky at best, full of contradictions, but it didn't matter. In a town like Maplewood, accusations weighed heavily. The people had already made up their minds. DeAndre was guilty. DeAndre's family, blindsided and horrified, tried to wrap their heads around the situation. His mother, Felicia, was devastated, but he was certainly no criminal. She couldn't fathom how anyone could believe he had anything to do with what happened to Sophia. But the town was turning. The stares from neighbors grew colder, more hostile. As if in response to the arrest, someone had vandalized the Lawsons' front porch with cruel racial front door, words that made Felicia's stomach turn, but also filled her with a growing sense of dread. The feeling of being hunted, of being in the wrong place at the wrong time, hung over her family like a storm cloud. By the time DeAndre's hearing came, everything seemed stacked against him. His public defender, a man with a receding hairline and a tired face, that DeAndre take a plea deal. "It's the best way to avoid a harsher sentence," he said in a low voice, his eyes darting around the courtroom. A few months in juvenile detention, maybe even probation. DeAndre couldn't believe it. He was being treated like a criminal without any proof, without any chance to defend himself. His head spun as the attorney pushed him toward a voice cut through the conversation, strong, confident. "I don't think that's necessary," a woman said, walking into the room with a folder under her arm. She was black, wearing a tailored suit that seemed to demand attention. "I'm Camille Foster. I'm here to represent DeAndre." The public defender blinked. "Who are you?" "I'm his attorney," Camille answered. Camille Foster had a reputation. Known for taking on tough cases, especially those that involved race, she had built a career challenging the town's old-fashioned legal system. She had a fire about her, a drive that DeAndre couldn't help but admire. The prosecutor, a heavy-set man named Richards, gave her a wary look going his way. But now, with Camille on the case, the game was changing. Camille spent the next few days diving into Maplewood's legal records. What she uncovered was chilling. It was clear that in the history of the town, black defendants had never won a case, not a single one. Every trial had ended in conviction. Everyone. When DeAndre was finally taken to the county jail, he wasn't from every side. Jail was a cold, harsh place. Guards, mostly white, treated him with open disdain. Inmates didn't take kindly to him either, some calling him names, others making threats. He kept his head down, trying to avoid trouble, but it was hard to ignore the tension building inside those walls. The first night in county was the muffled shouts of other prisoners, the clatter of metal, the sound of slamming doors. But it wasn't just the physical confinement that wore him down. It was the weight of everything happening outside. His family, the town, and the looming trial. How long would it take before the truth was finally revealed? At the same time, Camille visited Sophia's family, noticing how eager they were to blame Marshall Lancaster was especially harsh. "You don't belong here," he told Camille, his words cold, devoid of any empathy. That evening, Terrence received an anonymous call. The voice on the line was jittery, barely audible, but urgent. "I know what happened to your son. Meet me at the old diner at midnight, and I'll tell you everything." Terrence, desperate for answers, drove to the diner. The air was still, too still. Before he could react, a car raced past, blinding him with its headlights, followed by the sharp crack of gunshots. Terrence dove behind his car for cover, heart pounding, as the car disappeared into the dark night. Whoever had fired those shots didn't want him digging any deeper. Back at home, on their door, the threats escalated. "Leave town, or else." And in the yard? At Burning Cross, Felicia, overwhelmed with fear, pleaded with Sophia's parents, but Marshall Lancaster only scowled and dismissed her. "Your family doesn't belong here," he said, his tone final. Sophia remained in a coma. When she finally woke, her parents rushed to her side, asking about the attack, but her responses were vague. It wasn't what they wanted to hear. "I don't remember," but they quickly hushed her up, insisting she focus on recovery. Camille was skeptical. Why wouldn't the Lancasters let Sophia speak? Something didn't add up. In the meantime, Camille unearthed a disturbing piece of history. 30 years ago, another black teen had been accused of attacking a white girl in Maplewood. That case had ended in tragedy. Before the trial could begin, the teen was lynched by a mob. And now, it seemed, they were doing the same to DeAndre. The trial continued, and the prosecution painted DeAndre as a violent thug, relying on racial stereotypes to convince the jury. Camille fought back, exposing contradictions in the witness's testimony. But the judge, connected to Sheriff Briggs, blocked crucial evidence. The system was rigged. Sophia's best friend took the stand, nervously repeating the town's narrative that DeAndre was guilty. It was clear. The town had already decided. That night, Terrence received another call from Alvin Turner, a former deputy. He asked to meet outside town, claiming he had crucial information about the case. Alvin revealed the horrifying truth. The black teen accused of assaulting the white girl had been lynched before his trial. It was all covered up. Before Alvin could say more, a car sped by and gunshots rang out. Alvin collapsed, and Terrence barely escaped, heart racing. Someone was willing to kill, dangerous than ever. And now, Terrence was tangled in something far bigger than just his son's trial. The fight for justice had only just begun. Terrence didn't waste any time. The night after Alvin's death, he told Camille everything, the man's confession, the threat that followed. But there was a problem. Without concrete proof, had no choice there was little to press on, determined to find something solid, something that would break the case wide open. Alvin's information was a lead, but it wasn't enough to topple the weight of Maplewood's secrets. Meanwhile, Felicia was restless. Days had passed, and Sophia's condition was improving, but she still wasn't talking. With everyone on edge, into the Felicia late at night, her heart racing as she approached Sophia's room. She had to get to the truth. Sophia looked fragile, almost childlike as she lay in her bed, her eyes dull. Felicia sat next to her, careful not to startle her. "I just want to understand, honey," Felicia said gently. "What happened that night?" Sophia's eyes flickered, and she glanced away, unsure, feeling dizzy. "I don't remember." "Then, I woke up in the woods. I don't know how I got there. I remember someone dragging me." She stopped, her voice cracking. "I don't remember DeAndre. I don't." The words felt like a heavy weight lifting off Felicia's chest. This was it, the first crack in the town story. But Felicia knew they needed more. That night, she couldn't let this slip away. And Terrence were home, their world came crashing down. The house they had worked so hard to build was set ablaze. Flames shot up into the sky, consuming everything. Terrence and Felicia barely managed to escape. The heat and smoke forcing them out. Watching everything they had disappear into the fire, it was clear. Someone was trying to silence them to make them leave town for good. Camille knew that if they were going to win, they needed Hannah to testify. But getting her to break wasn't easy. For days, Hannah had remained loyal to the story everyone had been fed. But Camille had learned something crucial, and it wasn't just the people in town she was afraid of. Finally, one night, Camille met Hannah in secret, outside the courthouse. The girl was shaking, her eyes darting around nervously. "Please, you have to help us," Camille said, her voice low. "You know the truth. Logan and his friends were with Sophia that night, weren't they?" Hannah hesitated, biting her lip. They'll come after me. Don't know if I should say anything." "You have to speak up, Hannah. DeAndre's life is on the line." Tears welled up in Hannah's eyes as she broke. "Logan, he spiked Sophia's drink. They thought it would be funny, but it went too far. They were laughing. But then they had to cover it up. They needed someone to blame. They said DeAndre. But I don't think he did anything." That was it. Camille now had the key to this new evidence in court. But things were about to get worse. As Camille was driving to meet with the defense team, she was suddenly pulled over by two officers, both corrupt, both connected to Sheriff Briggs. They dragged her out of the car, beating her without warning. "You're about to make a big mistake," one of them sneered. "This town doesn't like troublemakers. You won't walk away from this." Camille fought to stay conscious, her body aching from the blows. But even as the officers threatened her, something inside her refused to break. She would not give up. The trial entered its final days, and the pressure was building. DeAndre's fate seemed sealed. The prosecution's case had been airtight, thanks to the biased narrative they had spun. On the last day of the trial, Camille showed up, bruised and battered, but with something that could change everything. The courtroom was tense as she prepared to present new evidence, but the judge was quick to stop her. "Objection," he barked. "This is irrelevant." But Camille wasn't backing down. She demanded the court allow her to call Hannah to the stand. When Hannah took the stand, everything changed. Logan and his friends. They were there. Logan spiked Sophia's drink. It wasn't DeAndre. He's innocent. I swear it. The courtroom was dead silent, but before anyone could react, something even more shocking happened. Sophia walked into the room, assisted by a nurse. The crowd parted as she made her way to the witness stand, tears in her eyes. I remember now, she said, her voice trembling. I don't remember him doing anything. It was Logan. It was always Logan and his friends. DeAndre didn't hurt me. Chaos erupted. The townspeople gasped, some angry, others confused. Sheriff Briggs stormed to the front, trying to control the situation. But Camille wasn't backing down. This is it, she shouted, standing tall in front of the judge. This is the truth. Logan and his friends. DeAndre security footage from a gas station was shown in court, revealing Logan and his friends carrying an unconscious Sophia into the woods. The evidence was undeniable. Logan and his friends were arrested, their lives shattered. DeAndre was freed. But while the victory felt sweet, there was no true celebration. Maplewood's dark past had been exposed, and the town's history of racial injustice could no investigation into the cases of black defendants who had never received a fair trial. The Lawsons were finally free to leave Maplewood. As they packed up their belongings, preparing to leave behind the town that had stolen so much from them, they found something waiting at their doorstep. An envelope. They found a photograph of the black teen from 30 years ago, the one who had been falsely accused. A handwritten note accompanied it. Justice is never given. It must be taken. The Lawsons exchanged a long look. The fight wasn't over. But at least for now, they had taken back some of what had been stolen. And they wouldn't stop until every wrong was righted.